Hi everyone, welcome to the latest episode of
Dude, last time I told you we weren't going to do this stupid intro again. And then you and your stupid pompous UK attitude, I said, "Hey, let's not do that intro." And now we're doing it. I'm not cool with this. I don't know what I have to tell you to stop making me be, I don't know, the pull string toy. I mean,
you chose
seriously,
you
dude.
you chose to do this live on the recording, Stephen. You chose to make it so that on my channel, on our podcast, you decided to draw a line arbitrarily about how to do the intro. Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I can do that. We're co-hosts. Seriously.
Well,
It infuriates me, dude. Your stupid hair, your stupid accent. You pull this every week.
well, you know
Every
something?
week.
You know something, Stephen? I respect you. You're one of the greatest actors I've had the pleasure of talking to, and I'm going to sound passive aggressive while complimenting you at the same time.
And scene.
And see,
Well, Jonathan.
hello,
Oh,
Stephen.
it's another episode of Dulcet Tones. What
There
could
it
happen
is.
next?
People have either been continuing to listen in horror or have tuned out in sheer awkwardness for how serious that was. Stephen, welcome back to
Yeah,
another
it's great
episode
to be
of
here.
Dulcet Tones. A
Great to be here.
pleasure, as always, to have you here
Yeah, it's
as
great to be
my
here.
ever jolly co-host. Each and every time we shoot one of these episodes, our performing arts podcast here at Burly Bird Media, we like Dulcet Tones to have a specific focus. So we've been looking at, in the past, we've looked at audition approaches, we've looked at developing character, and our focus for this episode tonight, and so apt that our intro allowed us to perhaps alter our tone somewhat in our
Whatever, yeah.
yes. It's all centered around the voice, which I think whether you are focused on entirely just voice acting in a booth, whether you're performing theatre or you are then scaling back a performance for TV and film in terms of your projection and volume, etc. It often a character I find certainly in the process I go through when I'm directing other actors, or even if I'm given the opportunity, rarely now, but the opportunity to approach something myself, I do find that I use the voice, the accent, the tone, the intention as my starting point. That tends
Okay,
to be the building block that follows. And I was curious, just to kind of kick it off, let's
sure.
sort of let's keep it sort of like focused in terms of the, especially in the voice acting space. We'll kind of give this a clear direction for
Mhm.
our discussion. When you are given a character, does an accent typically come first, or do you look to something like an emotion and an intention before the voice is solidified?
That's a good question. It depends on the amount of data and information I'm given. So the first thing I personally look at is the scene that's going to be conveyed, scene, and then the characteristics of the
Mm.
description of the character, age. Sometimes they say they want a certain accent, so well, there right away you're going to build that character's accent, that identity. Whether it's a person that's complacent or they're aggressive or they're a whirlwind, like the intro we kind of did there a little bit.
Mm.
um but the thing is, it's the scene. So it's the scene. I look at this. Hey, it's the scene that I've got to convey. And then once I see that scene, how would that actor relate to it? And then how would that voice make it all seem organic and seem measured and seem real? That, if that makes sense a little bit.
Well, yeah, of course, because it has to be rooted in reality, right?
Yeah,
If you
it has
don't
to be.
buy it yourself, there's no way that a director in the booth or indeed the audience listening will then buy into the character that you've created. That it's, I've always tried to sort of teach my students whenever I've been in a theatrical context and not in voice acting, but I've always tried to tell them that you have to root it in truth. It has to be whatever choice you're making has to be believable enough. Otherwise, audiences have professional bullshit detectors. They'll just be able to see straight through it. I think so often though, and I've definitely fallen into this trap as an actor now, sort of flipping the script a little bit, like on just on the performing side, I have found myself uh, choosing something eccentric or choosing something deliberately different from my own voice for the sake of showing some semblance of range or showing sort of that, oh, look how impressive and capable I am, instead of actually asking myself what fundamentally does the character need. And that I think sometimes actually that actors, perhaps out of fear of being typecast, will often then be more reluctant to use their own voice rather than which is the closest to the truth, right? It's
Yeah.
it's a tough
Sorry,
thing.
continue. it's a real tough thing because there can be natural built-in anxiety if you're using your own voice because you're like, me personally, do I really sound like that if I was in that scenario?
Hmm.
But if I'm portraying a voice that's distant from who I am, I'm then envisioning this character. But sometimes it can sound authentic, and it almost gives me this easy feeling I can breathe because hey, that really isn't me. That's this
Right.
character voice I'm
Gives you a
portraying.
separation.
It gives you the separation, and you're less, I guess you're less critical. You're less critical of your performance. That's at least me personally, of your audition or the content you're going to put out there. When it's close to your voice, when it's kind of close to who you are, you're like you know, you've lived in those real life scenarios
Hmm.
or variations of them, and you're like, is this really it? At least that's how it can be for me. But I was going to mention too, and one of my biggest faults, and it was probably I've been doing this for quite a few years, is the fact that my particular voice, I thought that I was older than what I can portray for
Mm.
roles. And this wasn't until probably like 4 months ago. I realized that I can do certain roles of characters that are in their early to mid 20s, because my natural voice is here. It sits here for the most part. But then I can actually sound younger and authentically sound younger. And I forgot about that. And I kind of realized that when I was doing some commercial voice work, and I pulled back. I go, oh, someone goes, man, you sound really young and bright and vibrant. And I go, oh shoot, you know what? Oh my God, it was like the light bulb went off.
Right. Kind of the
So
epiphany moment.
yeah,
Nice.
it was, and I'm like, and those characters, those are closer to home. They're not necessarily an accent; it's a character, but it's not that accent. And then you work in some accents, obviously, like I was saying earlier, if the description calls for it, if you feel comfortable doing it, then you can start working on the accent. Most Americans will go toward the UK stuff, or they'll do a Southern accent.
Hmm.
That's at least the ones I've seen when they do a character voice. And it's like, well, I'll do this voice here and I'll sound like I'm from
Yeah,
Louisiana in 1875 or whatever.
the
And it's
flip
just sound,
the flip for us is that we just go sort of like generic
Midwest.
American. Like
Yeah,
there isn't
yeah.
like regions sort of become obscured and it just becomes like somewhere like this. You just kind of like up here and nothing is there's no specificity to it. You can pin like a state. It just sounds like that.
So
And it
everyone's Peter Parker?
Yeah,
Is that what you're
everyone
saying?
is just Spider-Man.
Everyone is
Um
Spider-Man. That's
yeah,
wonderful.
right, but
And,
that's
and when,
that's
when I do British, it's,
I've seen that in countless scenarios where it's been
yeah.
like a kid coming in and I've been like on the panel side of things like at National Youth Theatre and I've seen them like just doing a 2 minute monologue and they just sort of play it straight down the middle, generic American, and that's something else that I do struggle with, is variation in vocals, especially when you're doing multiple takes, because I know that the beauty of voice acting and arguably, film and TV, less so theater because it's so immediate, but the great benefit in some ways is the ability to go, I'll do another run. I'll take another swing at that. And having multiple takes for a lot of actors can be like a really good safety net, I think, for them because they know that they may have taken a risk or they might have like put a weird emphasis on a certain word on that particular take, but it's okay because we can play this one a little bit more closer to the direction, and that's fine. It's when I think sometimes I'm required to do multiple takes, not as a safety net, as I've said, like, in terms of like making mistakes, but if the director is saying, no, can we go again? Let's go again. Give me something new, give me something fresh. That's when I know I struggle to find reasons to vary the line, and I find that
Gotcha.
tougher, I think. And that I was curious again if you have ever found that to be a challenge, or actually do you frame it as an opportunity, the chance to go, I can get this more right by experimenting with my choices.
I like it more as an opportunity more recently in my acting career.
Okay.
Earlier on, it was like, wow, how can I do this? But if we're talking like are you thinking of like regular voice, character voice? Are you thinking accent to character?
No,
Or
just like
what are you?
regular, like you're playing it perhaps in a relatively, your own accent, close to your own
Yeah,
tone, but
yeah.
you're being required to make those
Oh, that's yeah.
alternative
I
choices.
enjoy that. I really enjoy
Okay.
that. Yeah, as long as there's a little bit of length to the text, there's got to be more than just
Right.
6 words, 7 words.
Hmm.
Then I can really enjoy it. I can flip the whole idea of giving it an antagonist approach, then a protagonist approach, then a
Hmm.
neutral read. You can really have some fun with it. You can also just change your pacing of it, remove the punctuation, add an exclamation point that isn't there, make a period. There's so many different ways to actually conquer or approach the script, and it's kind of fun. I look at it as a fun challenge. If you're
Interesting.
getting live directed, you can quickly, I believe, get into that character, and sometimes it opens up the eyes and the ears of the director, or just it really helps. I believe everyone focus too, because it presents them with the opportunity to see things differently, as long as you're not
Right.
rushed.
Yeah.
And if you though are doing your self direction and you're sending your takes, and it depends if you're doing ABC or AABBCC. You know what I'm talking about? When I'm,
Oh,
do
in
you know
terms
my
of like
reference?
line reads and rhythm and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, the line reads like a lot of times. The director they'll want an A, B, C, meaning there's three lines,
Yeah.
and they want you to go, A, B, and C. Then if you're going to do it again, A, B, and C. Others want A, B, B, C,
Give
C.
me the
So you're
straight alternate. Give me the
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So that's a preference for them. It's for me. I kind of
Hmm.
like if we're doing live direction. I like AABBCC
Just gonna
because
say, I think
yeah.
that would be my preference in that.
Mhm.
Now that I've thought about that, and I have had scenarios where, like, mainly in live theatre, where I might have been asked to like run a scene again,
Yep.
but then because of the nature of the medium, you are running it in perpetuity. You are showing, okay, let's run that page, and then
Yeah.
that extract is then run. You would never typically be afforded the chance to do the line and then do the line again before moving on to the next bit of dialogue, especially in live action. It just wouldn't doesn't fit. But that's a sort of unique benefit. You framed it best as an opportunity within the voice acting space to get it more right if you're
Hmm.
willing to take those risks. And that perhaps has always been something I've been a bit restrained with, is that I don't tend to vary my vocal choices too much when I'm performing, or even indeed when I'm directing. I'll use the text, I'll use obviously the punctuation for pausing,
Hmm.
any bolded, underlined, italicized words for emphasis. Good writing is giving the actors those tools to then read them clearly and then present it. But I tend not to deviate too much. It's kind of the pick a lane approach. I kind of decided where I'm going to go with it, and that tends to be what I do, which one could argue could lead to a performance being a bit stagnant and a bit repetitive. But equally, I like there's elements of consistency to it as well, and then I'll be directed from there. Then I'll have
Yeah.
tweaks and changes, etc. But I love being directed. I really like the feedback. I really welcome that. And I know that for some actors that can again feel like they're being pigeonholed a little bit because of someone else's vision. But I certainly just on purely from a selfish perspective, I like being told, no, try this, and I will hit that beat for beat. I know I will be able to hit this mark, and this mark. If you've outlined it for me like that, I will hit those beats and those key points. But perhaps that then could restrict my ability to play with it a little bit and be a little bit freer. It's a real dichotomy that I really struggle with as an actor, is knowing when to take the risk and maybe go a little bit off book. In terms of choices, not in terms of the text itself, but in terms of the
Yep.
choices you're making, versus just going, okay, I'm going to deliver this interpretation that I've been given. And I find that pendulum swing really tricky to figure out which one is best. And I didn't know if, generally speaking, like just what an amazing case study, something like the Knockout City character you played playing the DJ, an incredible case study in terms of the fact that you had to do some like quite long form, like the Deep Space Dispatches and those recordings,
Yeah.
as well as the quick lines that introduced each round. Did you find there was a bit more scope to play with it when you had the longer recordings to do? Or was it very much like VLAN kind of gave you very specific direction to be like, okay, these are the beats you need to hit?
It was a lot of opportunity to play with the script, to play with the character.
Nice. We've
Yeah,
never
it
talked
was.
about this actually. This is
No,
in
we
all of
we
our
haven't.
many episodes.
For those guys, they paint the picture of the scene, what was going on,
Hmm.
a loose picture, and they're like, all right, let's run through it. Get a feel for my voice. Plus, you're kind of like just warming up with that character voice,
Yes.
and you're working, beginning to end. And then now they're hearing it. They're hearing their writing out loud come alive, and they're like, "Oh, I like this. You know what? Hey, Steve, when we get to the third sentence, believe it or not, there's going to be in that game where there's going to be a brawler that's going to zoom across the screen. He's going to get balled up and he's going to get tossed for an ultimate
Mm.
throw. So can you give us a beat there? Like you're almost in awe of what's happening." And I'm like, "Oh, sweet." So we literally it's a work in progress, and that's the beauty of booking time for these live recordings.
Mm.
If you're doing that with self directing, there can be a little apprehension, but then you have to have that confidence, and then you're like, I'm just going to give them. I know they want 3 takes. We're giving them 5 takes, because you want the project to sound good
Of
no matter
course,
what.
yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely we had the ability to kind of to play with the text as it went, how it was interpreted, especially the long form stuff, the deep space dispatches. The character as the seasons progressed, obviously different storylines, and then the final one where it was the end of the sunsetting phase. It was it was a character that was braggadocious, and then he got scared. He
Mm.
was really scared, and that was a point where I had to kind of latch into how am I going to convey that emotion,
Yeah, different
the the,
flavor there
the
for
different
sure.
flavor, and still do it in the character voice that was similar to my own, but also make it sound authentic. So
Right.
I thought of just some lonely points in my life, and I just kind of we did like 4 or 5 takes of it, and pulled away from the mic a little bit, got sad, was scared, and then I just we delivered it, and they
Nice.
chose what they did.
That
But
that's
that's how I kind of got
very
into it.
that's very Stanislavski emotional memory, which I really like. The idea of accessing feelings, like the memory of how you felt about something, and then drawing that memory forward. And it's the feeling that you're bringing forward, not the memory itself. And I really like that idea. I often find actually that I tend to start with the tone. I'll start with the emotion first. What
Yep.
is that emotion behind the line? What's the subtext there? Then I'll find my pitch or my accent or both, and then make the choices about emphasis and volume from there. It always roots for me in the emotion of the line. You start with that using something like Stan's emotional memory. That tends to be my anchor point, and then I carry forward from there.
I do the same thing, and in voice acting we call pre-life and post-life, and
Oh, that's an
sometimes
interesting way of phrasing that. Can you
yeah,
talk me through that? Because that's immediately like I've had a light bulb moment there. You say pre-life and post-life?
yeah, and that's basically it's your text, and it's
Yeah.
your lead-in energy, and it's your outro energy. So some directors
Mm.
like it, some don't. Meaning sometimes you're going to do ad-libbing. You're going to ad-lib
Hmm.
leading into what they have presented to you, and then maybe some ad-libbing afterwards. Or it could just be that energy
Right.
that
Yeah,
you start like that. You start with the sound, or you're working into the scene. So some people like it, some don't. A lot of times they really like that. What I've seen recently in some of the casting calls, where you're starting with an emotion. You're just you're sad, and you're sorry. You're sorry that this, and then that
yeah.
this is the actual line.
Yes, so
So
let the sort of almost it's improving, isn't it? The emotion
yep.
beforehand to get you into that actual dialogue and then
Hmm.
allow a little bit of a tail at the end. That's a really the pre and post life phrasing, I think, is a really nice way of pitching that. That's
Hmm.
interesting.
You
I
can do
might
that
have to pinch
with
that.
like bigger characters too. If they got like a growl or they're mean, sometimes
Hmm.
I'd warm up. I'd start like a rumble my voice. No, you need to. You
And
build
then into
into
the
it.
like, yeah,
Yeah,
nice.
and it's exactly otherwise. I mean, it's you need to, but to do that extra build up, or you're exasperated, characters out of breath. You'll let yourself get out of breath. Then maybe
Yes.
give a little bit of a pause, so in case they want to chop it, and then do the line.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
I have seen some behind the scenes footage, especially if actors are doing like a ADR for an action scene or something, and they'll run on the spot
Yep.
to get themselves like a little out of breath, and then there's a natural pacing to it which really works, and I think
Hmm.
that's something I've always really liked that actually the physicality in the booth. I mean, you've talked about that actually before about that you will use gesture sometimes when you're by the microphone, even though it's
Hmm.
not you're not being mocapped or it's not being sort of like helmet cam for reference. It's just your voice being recorded, but you'll still physicalize it, you know, um, in the booth. I
Because you
know
sync.
Jeff Steitzer. Well, I've talked to him about that before.
Yeah.
He has a very similar approach that even with something like the Halo announcer, there'll be little gestures coming into play depending on the line, which I really like that. I really like that concept.
Oh yeah, you're synced up. You're literally your body and that emotion. You're doing it in the same. It adds rhythm to your cadence if it's needed,
Mm.
energy or change of energy, change of tone. You have to act it out because I mean, if you're just very stiff, it's hard. I mean, I don't. You can do it, and it depends on the roles. Maybe some commercial work it's easier with, but if you're really getting into the character, it just kind of helps you get the vibe, and it syncs
Mm.
up and it adds more realism to what you're doing. And it's this isn't even me like overacting. It's just when I'm doing this, I'm gonna talk like this,
Yeah, nice. I
so
think
or
yeah,
speak
that
like that.
you saying that I think that was actually a really good way of phrasing that too. The syncing up those choices I think makes sense because it makes it easier to connect with it too. It's yeah, not an easy problem to solve, and I think often can be a barrier for actors when they're attacking a character is figuring out the tone and intention first. But I always try to start with that, and then naturally the accent and the specific reads and choices kind of naturally flow from there. But it always is rooted and anchored in emotion for me to
Hmm.
start with. That has always really helped me. Well, thanks, folks, so much for tuning in to the latest episode of Dulcet Tones featuring the legendary Stephen Murray, my co-host. Thanks you again for joining me, Stephen. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and pick your brain on everything acting and performing arts. It's kind of where our podcast is focused. So it is very, very much appreciated. Stephen, where can people find you?
On Instagram and Threads, it's the same handle of Murdog77. Again, because I'm 13 years old. That's MurrDogg77. My website is Voice Actor Garage. And Facebook, it's going to be my full name, Stephen Murray with a 518. STEPHENMURRAY 518, because there are a lot of other Stephen Murrays. I think I've told the story before. I tried to contact them all and connect with them. So on the birthdays, it's Stephen Murray wishing Stephen Murray a happy birthday because I'm weird like that.
Yeah,
So
but that's
those are
really
my main
wholesome.
handles.
That's really
Yeah, I mean,
jolly.
awesome. I'm on X, but that's Murray Dog, MurrAYDOGG77. You guys want to follow me on there, and I got some cool stuff coming up. Or by the time this hits, maybe it's already going to be out. So yeah.
Nice. Well, you can find us on all of the platforms at Burly Bird Media. We are on Threads, Facebook, Instagram. You can also find us on YouTube, Spotify, Podbean, and also our Discord server, our community. Please do come and join us. It's a really, really wholesome, welcoming space where people are sharing their art, their creativity, things they're working on, discussing games and films and other media. But also, we have our live shows twice a week over on twitch.tv/Burly Bird Media. You can check out System Link, which is our live gaming podcast with my co-host Mike Hazelton every single Wednesday at 9 p.m. UK time. And then on a Saturday, we have Burly Bird Live, which is our live gaming show. Where we're playing something. Normally, Mike and I are playing something. We've had Stephen on as a guest, as an odd guest before as well. So please do consider checking that out. And video on demand versions of that will always go up on our YouTube channel 24 hours later, all available for free. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. And we will see you next time.